When you were growing up, what was your favorite kids' TV show? Maybe it was Pokemon or the Magic School Bus, Drake and Josh, Dexter's Lab, Adventures of Pete and Pete. Really, your favorite kids show could have been anything. But for me, it was Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. You know the story. 5 teenagers given color-coordinated super suits, defending the Earth against the forces of evil. Premiering in 1993, the show was an instant hit with kids, and it's easy to understand why. It had superheroes, martial arts, sword fights, dinosaurs, lasers, giant robot battles, all wrapped up in a single 30-minute package, and I loved it. I watched it every day after school, as soon as I got home, and my favorite character was the Blue Ranger, Billy. Yeah, Billy was the worst fighter. Hell, he starts the series as a karate white belt, but he made up for it with his brains over brawn approaches to conflict and his clever inventions. Teleporters, mind-switching machines, flying cars. Billy made being nerdy cool back when being nerdy wasn't cool. For me, he was Power Rangers. Until one day, Billy just sort of vanished. Out of nowhere, the show threw together this really bizarre story of him just going off to live on an alien planet with a goodbye video obviously voiced by a different actor.
Guys, I've made a really important decision. I'll miss you all, but I'm going to stay here on Aquatar with Cestria.
Yeah, after nearly 200 episodes on the series, Billy literally got poochied. As a kid, I was so annoyed that I stopped watching the show entirely. Why the actor who played Billy, David Yost, left so suddenly remained a mystery for years until 2010, when he finally revealed that things behind the scenes weren't so more phenomenal. Yost quit the show because some of the producers and crew had been ruthlessly bullying him for being gay. David Yost got so depressed that he started having thoughts about, not being alive anymore, so he quit the show, enrolled in gay conversion therapy, which obviously made things worse, and he suffered a complete mental breakdown. But problems like this behind the scenes in kids' TV certainly aren't rare. Hi, I'm Paper Will. I make deep dive content about unusual media, and today we're looking into the less pleasant side behind children's television shows. Think abusive production, censorship, weird lawsuits, the lives of TV animals, controversies, and more. Welcome to the ugly side of kids' TV. Hit it!
It's the ugly side of kids' TV. Everything that we knew was the ugly side of kids' TV. Things were troublesome all along. The ugly side of kids' TV. With Paper Will.
Airing in the 1980s, Joy Junction was a Christian-themed television game show, with each episode based around teaching a lesson from the Bible. The audience was divided into teams, and members from each team participated in various physical challenges like paper throwing, balloon popping, ice cream scooping, and line Pepsi can pouring, which I don't think they're allowed to do that, but they did it.
Find your opener! Quick, open another bottle!
At the end of each show, the team with the most points would win all the prizes, like these sweet watches. What were the watches for?
To remind them that it is always time to put God first.
While Joy Junction lacked high-budget values, it's clear that the cast and crew put a significant amount of time and effort into the production. Occasionally, they'd go all out in creating these elaborate costumes and set pieces, some of which would only get used for a few seconds. That's impressive! In between the physical challenges, the show also featured painters, comedians, cooks, some of the most uncomfortable children you have ever seen, as well as really big song and dance numbers, like this one about having patience before snack time.
Something to eat. Gotta have a treat. Something to munch. Can't wait to lunch. Food. Gotta fill my tongue.
Look, I know it's easy to poke fun at stuff like this, but honestly, for a bunch of 12-year-olds, that's not a terrible music performance, and it's certainly not the worst thing on the show. Let's talk about the puppeteer, Ronald Brown. Brown's Christian ventriloquist work had developed a strong following at his local churches, making him a perfect fit for Joy Junction. Brown even hosted weekly pizza parties at his house for many of the kids, and it seemed like everybody in the community really liked this guy. And all of that would just be wholesome and neat and great if not for the fact that Ronald Brown really wanted to eat some children. Hey, I told you things are gonna get, ugly today. Doesn't get much uglier than predator cannibal puppeteers hosting a Christian game show for children. The first signs that Brown might not be such a great guy would be in the early 1990s when, during a routine traffic stop, police noticed something unusual in the backseat of his car. Children's undergarments. Brown, thinking quickly, told the cops that the undergarments were for his puppet, Marty, which was somehow accepted by the police as a not insane thing for a human to say, and they just let the man go. In 2013, the truth finally came out as Ronald Brown was arrested for participating in an online community of predators surrounding the practice of, well, a lot of horrible things, but mainly the eating children stuff. According to the chat logs released during the trial, Brown would even refer to his targets that he had met on the show as his, and I'm quoting here, little piglets who would make for fine Easter feast. Oh, that's creepy. Fortunately, Brown was sentenced to 20 years in prison for his involvement in that community, and considering his old age, that's probably going to be a life sentence. Hopefully. Real quick announcement here. Smoking is bad for you. Any objections? Everybody okay with that? All right, then we're all on the same page. But for television network executives in the mid-20th century, the fact that tobacco was already widely known to be dangerous, well, that wasn't really a big enough deterrent for Hanna-Barbera cartoons to reject that smooth, succulent tobacco ad money.
Okay? How's about taking that? I got a better idea. Let's take a Winston break.
And while it's kind of fun to laugh at how absurd these ads are, there's also a sad twist here that the entire main cast of the Flintstones would all eventually pass away due to smoking-related illnesses. Still, in 1967, the FCC started enforcing what's called the Fairness Doctrine on tobacco ads. For every 3 cigarette ads on television stations, 1 anti-smoking commercial would have to be aired and paid for by the tobacco industry. The compromise worked decently well, and the anti-tobacco ads led to a sudden and dramatic drop in smoking rates in the United States, somewhere between 5 to 10%. Eventually, smoking ads on TV were banned entirely, but also not really, since cigarette companies could still pay for advertisements on billboards and signs in sporting events that were being televised, like NASCAR and especially baseball. For decades, you could find a tobacco company's logo and name out there in the bleachers, especially visible during home runs, the moment people are paying the most attention to. Even when sporting agencies started cracking down on logos, sponsors got really clever in hiding their ads anyway. But I'm getting off track. This video is supposed to be about kids' TV stuff, like how in 2015, Juul Labs, the electronic cigarettes maker, bought advertisements to display on various children's TV websites like CartoonNetwork.com and Nickelodeon.com. In their defense, Juul claimed that they weren't intentionally marketing to underage users, and hey, I'm sure there's some adults on CartoonNetwork.com, but how about the other sites they advertised on, like CoolMathGames.com, BasicMathematics.com, and oh, this one's great, SocialStudiesForKids.com. Holy shit, Juul! In 2020, the Massachusetts Attorney General's office filed a lawsuit over these ads, which is currently ongoing, but not looking great for Juul. And in 2015, there was also mounting pressure on Puff Bar for targeting teens, with flavors like pina colada, watermelon, and a flavor literally called OMG. Okay, just for a second, we're going to pretend that OMG is a flavor, because obviously it's not a real flavor. What the hell would that be? That's still not a flavor that you market to adults. You know what? Maybe smoking ads for children and that creepy-eyed, now-in-turn puppet tiny people eater were a little too heavy for our first couple of topics. Let's do something fun next. Just kidding, this one's gonna suck too. Here's a list of beloved animal stars that aren't alive anymore. Keiko, the orca from Free Willy, the dog from Air Bud, Mr. Ed the horse, Spuds McKenzie, the dog from the Little Rascals. Okay, that was like 100 years ago. Of course he's dead. Most dogs who have played Lassie. Sad, but again, not unexpected. All 48 of the pigs who've played Babe the Pig. All of them? All of them. How long do pigs live? And finally, that little sneezing baby panda Chi-Chi, who, yes, had their own movie, and yes, is also dead. So what does any of that have to do with Flipper or children's television? Truthfully, not that much. None of those animals' deaths were the fault of Hollywood or TV. They lived full, healthy, happy lives before dying. Well, not the Little Rascals dog. Yeah, he got straight up poisoned by somebody on set, which is messed up. Oh, or Keiko, she got dumped into the ocean and then never really assimilated with other orca and then died alone of pneumonia. But the other animals, full lives, full happy lives. Still, it's at least fair that we delve into humanity's rocky history when it comes to animals being used or abused for entertainment. Here's a neat ancient Roman history fact. You already knew that lions were commonly used in the Colosseum arena games, but did you know that when the Romans first dropped lions into the pit to fight people, lions, they just kind of wouldn't. It's true, in the early games, these terrified friggin' lions got tossed into an enclosed space with 100,000 people screaming at them and did what anybody would do, what I would do. They just went and hid in the corners. The audience was mighty disappointed by that, although you have to imagine that the people in the arena were probably pretty thrilled. To make sure that lions would be more aggressive, the Roman animal trainers started breeding them inside the halls of the Colosseum and conditioning them to attack people, all for our entertainment. Things have improved for animal entertainment in the modern era, but there are still unpleasant stories from behind the scenes. Let's talk about Flipper. Inspired by the 1950s TV show Lassie, which was about a dog that went around and helped people out of dangerous situations, Flipper was about a dolphin that went around and helped people out of dangerous situations. You may be thinking, hey, how many situations can a dolphin actually help people in? And the answer is, not that many. So the writers had to keep coming up with increasingly elaborate and implausible scenarios that could somehow only be resolved by a wicked smart dolphin. There were boat-based hostage situations, oil rig counterfeit operation bust. There's one where Flipper is put on a plane. They put a dolphin on a plane to take him to a laboratory that wants to teach him how to speak English. There's a communist spy plot. There were multiple episodes where Flipper eats something valuable, like a bracelet or whatever, and everyone's like, well, Flipper, thanks for always saving our dumbass kids, but this rich woman really wants that diamond necklace you ate. We're just gonna have to cut you open to get it. Yep. This happened like 3 times in a show with 60 episodes. Flipper was a weird f***ing show. The role of Flipper was mostly played by a dolphin named Kathy, who had been caught in the wild and trained for performances, and by all accounts, Kathy seemed to enjoy working on the series, and there's no evidence of mistreatment by her trainers or the staff during production. But after the show ended, things took a downward turn for Kathy's well-being. She was sent to live in a small chamber in the Miami Seaquarium, which, after years of frequent outings for show filmings and constant human interaction, she had a lot of trouble adjusting to. According to the staff there, Kathy wouldn't eat, wouldn't swim, and eventually started intentionally hurting herself against the walls of the chamber, a thing dolphins apparently do. The staff called in Rich O'Barry, Kathy's former trainer from the show, who said that when he found Kathy, she swam into his arms, held her breath, and passed out in the water, dying soon after. O'Barry believes her death was intentional, self-termination. If I can get up on a soapbox for a second here, something TV studios and Hollywood in general are usually really good at is protecting animal performers during show productions. At least they are now. But there's no additional regulations on how animal stars are cared for off-set after a show ends. In the late 1960s, television producer Joanne Gans Cooney and early educational specialist Lloyd Morissette were developing plans for a new kind of children's television program, focusing on educating children instead of just entertaining them. But they needed a way to keep kids' attention for the entire length of the show's runtime, and the answer was puppets. Enter Jim Henson. Henson had made a name for himself in television, puppeteering with both his short-lived but popular 1950s series Sam and Friends, as well as a few well-received talk show performances. Cooney and Morissette asked Henson and his team to design, craft, and perform as the show's puppets, or Muppets as Henson called them. Henson agreed to help, and in 1969, Sesame Street hit the air. Parents loved the learning-centric element of the show, and everybody loved Henson's creations like Big Bird, Oscar the Grouch, and Cookie Monster. Now, Henson was proud of his work on Sesame Street, but he also wanted to produce a show of his own. So in 1973, Henson pitched a new series idea using a mock-up pilot video, which was just fantastic.
A show that will be loved and adored by every Nielsen home in the country. Freaky, long-haired, dirty, cynical hippies will love our freaky, long-haired, dirty, cynical Muppets. And we'll all get temperamental and hard to work with, but you won't care, because we'll all make a lot of money.
And in a really weird twist of fate, one of the executives he pitched to at ABC with this show was none other than a young Michael Eisner, a man who would later become an infamous CEO of Disney. That'll be important later, but Eisner loved the Muppets so much that he greenlit the project not just for 1, but for 2 more pilot episodes, including the Muppet Show Sex and Violence, which is not what it sounds like, but you kind of wish it was, right? While ABC ultimately passed on the Muppets, British channel ATV swooped in and ordered a full season of the project, giving us The Muppet Show. The series debuted to incredible success, running for 5 seasons, getting 21 Emmy nominations, and launching movies, merch, and puppet cartoons. Thanks to Henson, as well as the hardworking crew on both shows, Sesame Street and the Muppets became cultural super icons for both kids and the world. And before we get into all the ugly stuff, let me just say without the slightest bit of shame, I adore both of these shows. Seriously, when's the last time you sat down and watched either series? I think because we grow up with these shows, we lose some appreciation for how incredibly talented and innovative the people working on them really are. Like, look at this shot from The Muppets Take Manhattan. That's not green screen, that's not editing, that's over 150 people helping to puppet these classic characters. And then there's Sesame Street, which has released over 5,000 episodes of high-quality educational television. If you tried to binge every episode of Sesame Street, it would take you over 140 days, over 4 months of uninterrupted binging to catch up. And there are multiple studies showing that kids who watch Sesame Street as young children had improved educational outcomes in elementary school and higher learning. Sesame Street is awesome. Plus, I think I've watched the outtakes of John Oliver and the Cookie Monster at least a dozen times.
What kind of belt you wearing?
Still, even these great series have their ugly sides. After Henson's tragically early passing in 1990, it would fall to Henson's children to choose who would replace him as the main performer of Kermit the Frog. They'd eventually choose Steve Whitmire, who seemed like a great choice as he had worked closely with Henson in nearly every Muppet production since the 1970s. Until Michael Eisner stepped in. Yeah, he's not done. See, the former ABC executive was now the CEO of Disney. Eisner had remained a huge fan of the series over the decades, and in 2004, he purchased the Muppet series for Disney. Unfortunately, Whitmire and the Big Cheese instantly developed an antagonistic relationship. Whitmire blamed Disney for the fighting, claiming that his aggressive pushback against them was always done to protect Henson's vision for the series, while Disney argued that Whitmire had been making outrageous demands, harassing writers and directors, and refusing to have a Kermit understudy so he could never be replaced. It's tempting to take Whitmire's side. After all, he was part of Henson's core team and had been an integral part of the Muppets franchise for years, but Disney wasn't the only party unhappy with him. Henson's own family claimed that Whitmire had been trying to take the series hostage, especially by refusing to have an understudy. Understand, it takes years to learn how to master one of these puppets well enough to seamlessly transition between puppeteers. For example, Matt Vogel, who took over performing Big Bird in 2015, had been studying the role under Carol Spinney since 1997. The Muppets ain't no joke. This feuding between Whitmire and Disney went on behind the scenes for nearly 10 years, and whether Whitmire was defending Henson's integrity or being a prima donna is up for you to decide, but personally I suspect it was a little column A, column B. Either way, things came to a head, and Whitmire's firing by Disney was leaked on the largest Muppets fan site, touchpig.com, that's a really gross name, by the way. I don't know why they would name. But the Muppet Show wasn't the only Henson series to run into trouble with their main mascot. Let's talk about Elmo. It might surprise you to hear that Elmo's a relative newcomer to the Sesame Street franchise, only becoming a main cast Muppet in 1985 with puppeteer Kevin Clash. Clash would continue working as Elmo's puppeteer for almost 25 years until 2012 when he was accused of inappropriate physical relations with a teenager. Now, we're not going to go into all the specifics because it's kind of an unusual case. There's a lot of twists and turns, internal investigations, allegations being made, then retracted, then remade, but ultimately the lawsuits were dismissed by the trial judge. Within the Sesame Street fan community, there's a intense split over whether Kevin Clash was guilty or innocent, but whatever the truth was, Kevin ended up leaving the project in 2013, and I think that was probably for the best. Not all problems and controversies with children's shows start behind the scenes, though. Sometimes it's the content itself. Like that episode of Total Drama-Rama where the kids want to get sick and stay home from school, so they go around licking things and like surfaces and floors trying to spread germs, which got aired right around the time of the COVID-19 pandemic, which was getting started.
Wait, what?
Or that Danish show John Dillerman, which was about a man and his giant prehensile tool that he used to do stuff like decorate Christmas trees or helicopter around or even save children with. Can I show this? Do I need to mosaic this? No, that's worse. No, that's fine. And there are hundreds, thousands of examples of problems caused by kids' television that have garnered outrage for any number of things. Way too many things for us to cover in one video. So instead, how about I just talk about a few examples of what I think are particularly interesting outrages and controversies. Starting with Tiny Toon Adventures. Set in the Looney Tooniverse, which is a thing, I guess, Tiny Toons followed a new cast of cartoons studying at Acme University who one day want to become big cartoon stars themselves. It was created as a collaboration between Warner Brothers and Amblin Television, Steven Spielberg's TV production studio, which was also notable for bringing us classics like Animaniacs, Freakazoid, Pinky and the Brain, and the Harry and the Hendersons TV sitcom, which was a real thing that happened, and there's nothing any of us can do to change that. But since Tiny Toons was an animated show in the early 1990s, it occasionally dipped into the very special lesson episodes. You know, stories and otherwise usually funny shows that try to ham-fistedly teach kids about the dangers of eating disorders and drugs and STDs and underage drinking, like that Tiny Toons episode, One Beer. In One Beer, Buster, Plucky, and Hampton decide to have a brewski and get drunk, leading to alienating classmates and getting into a bunch of bad decisions, and even ending with them driving off a cliff in a stolen police car. The things you do when you drink. Of course, it's then revealed that the whole episode was a PSA by the characters to show the dangers of drunk driving, I think, but still. The episode One Beer caught the attention of a lot of parental groups who felt the whole episode was a little too dark, a little too much for kids, and successfully pushed to get the whole episode banned. And Hey, it's great to educate minors about mature topics, but truthfully, the episode 1 beer just isn't very good. In fact, the episode is so unpopular that there's a theory that the show's writers intentionally made it bad in protest of the networks pressuring them to add more morality to episodes like this. Which makes sense considering the little dig at the end of the episode.
So, do we get to do a funny episode tomorrow? I hope so.
But Tiny Toons wasn't the only 90s cartoon that had its share of controversy. In the first season of the Pokemon animated series, there was a huge scandal over episode 38, Electric Warrior Porygon. In fact, a lot of you probably think you already know this tale, right? Old episode of Pokemon, only aired in Japan once, had a bunch of flashing lights during a battle, caused thousands of children to get sick or suffer epileptic seizures, and then the episode was banned. But there's more to this story than you might know. Let's back up. In the episode, Ash and his friends use a dimensional transporter to chase after Team Rocket, who have stolen a new type of prototype Pokemon, Porygon. At the end, there's this intense and flashy scene with a series of bright, quick-shifting red and blue lights, the same kind of quick-shift lights that can sometimes induce seizures for those with photosensitive epilepsy. In the immediate period after the episode aired in Japan, there was a mass occurrence of young viewers experiencing nausea, sickness, vision impairment, and headaches, with over 600 viewers taken to hospitals, all kids. News channels were quick to cover the unfolding emergency, warning parents to check to see if their children were okay, and also to erase any VHS recordings they might have made, because of this. Although a shiny 100 yen coin to the geniuses at one news channel's coverage, who apparently re-aired the dangerous footage over and over and over again while talking about it, which caused more kids to get sick before somebody realized, hey, let's stop doing that. Good going there, team. In the week the episode aired, there was over 12,000 kids reported feeling ill over Electric Warrior Porygon. Nintendo announced an official apology, and they even stopped airing new episodes of the show for a while. Many anime, especially the ones for children, began airing short messages before broadcasts, warning kids not to watch the show in a dark room, a practice that persists even today. And while Pokemon would return to television a few months later, it's pretty crazy to think 12,000 children were hurt by Nintendo's irresponsible animation. Or were they? What if I told you that this Porygon episode story was completely made up? Well, no, that would make me a liar. All that stuff actually happened. But there is some debate over whether or not the episode was as dangerous as people first thought. Let's talk about that 12,000 number. Yes, the original 600 kids taken to hospitals immediately after watching the episode absolutely suffered a negative side effect from the show, but of those 600 kids, only about 150 were hospitalized for seizures or severe symptoms, although 150 kids in a hospital, still pretty bad. But the other 11,500 children who reported symptoms only started feeling sick in the days after the episode aired. Weird, right? Like, why would kids start getting sick in the days after seeing the episode? Well, several studies have suggested that while the episode was absolutely dangerous to children prone to photosensitive epileptic seizures, the majority of kids likely develop side effects due to mass hysteria. Which makes sense. The kids watch the episode, feel fine, but then they go to school, and the next day everybody's talking about how that episode makes you feel sick. And then they go home and their parents are talking about that episode that is supposed to make you feel sick, and it's all over the news with endless footage of children in ambulances and hospital beds. Young children aren't stupid, but they're impressionable, and being surrounded by that kind of news for days is probably what led to the majority of kids reporting illnesses. And if that sounds a little far-fetched, well, it's happened before. There was this Portuguese teen drama called Morangos com Açúcar, which had an episode about a flu going around getting everybody sick. The next day, in real life, there were hundreds of reported cases of flu-like symptoms tracked over 14 schools around the country, some that even had to get shut down while the faculty were trying to figure out what the hell was happening. However, it turned out to be less a magical virus that infects people through television waves and more just lots of teens watching a popular teen drama. Rumors started and everything snowballed with continuous media coverage of the problem. But getting back to Pokemon, while they're not nearly as famous as the Porygon Seizure incident, Pokemon's had some other controversies as well, like the problems over one Pokemon for its negative depiction of actually not that Pokemon, not Jinx. Yeah, I know some have suggested that Jinx's design is kind of racist, but the design is probably just a reference to Japanese Ganguro fashion combined with female opera singer imagery. No, the negative depiction that I'm talking about is actually, no, not Ludicolo, the sombrero Pokemon who dances to vaguely Latin American music. Although that's not great, but it's whatever. No, the Pokemon that's caused Nintendo the most trouble over a negative depiction is Kadabra. Have you ever noticed that the spoon-wielding psychic-type Pokemon Kadabra has been missing from the main Pokemon anime for a very, very long time? No, really, the last time the Pokemon appeared was nearly 20 years ago in the 2005 episode Fear Factory Phony. So what gives? Why has Kadabra been out of the series for so long? Well, it's all because of this man, Uri Geller. Uri Geller, seen here sitting on a throne made out of spoons, like one does, is a former magician turned television psychic who gathered fame in the 1970s for bending spoons with the power of his mind. I mean, in actuality, he would just bend the spoons a lot beforehand to loosen them and then use various sleights of hand to distract the audience while he bent the spoons with his fingers. And people fell for this all over the world, including Japan, especially Japan. He was really popular there. Which brings us back to Kadabra. You've probably made the connection between Geller, Kadabra, and the spoon. I mean, sure, Geller didn't invent spoon bending, but it was sort of his whole shtick. And the guy was very well known in Japan. He even had a music album. Even worse, the original Japanese name of Kadabra is actually Yungerer, which is a combination of the characters from Yuri and Geller, his first and last name. So it's not just some weird spoon incidents. Geller was so upset about all of this that in 2000, he attempted to sue Nintendo for $60 million, claiming that Kadabra unlawfully used his image and that Nintendo had turned him into a, quote, evil occult Pokemon character. Which, true, but whatever. Personally, I never saw what the big deal was in the first place. He got his very own Pokemon. I would love to have my own Pokemon. What the hell?
Platypyrus.
What the hell is that?
Platypyrus.
Get away!
Platypyrus.
Help! Kill it!
Platypyrus.
Is it going? Is it going? Jesus, those eyes. Okay, where are we now? What channel is this? Oh, good. Gay Panic. It's current year, and there are still groups out there that'll fight tooth and nail against LGBT characters in kids' TV. Legend of Korra, Andy Mack, She-Ra, 12 Forever, Play School, Arthur, Clarence, Steven Universe, Sesame Street, The Loud House, The Owl House, My Little Pony Adventure Time, and a bazillion other shows have all seen their share of outrage just for having gay or trans characters. But as important as those shows' representations have been, many of them were released in a time where acceptance of LGBT has thankfully grown quite a bit. But in 2003, it was still pretty risky to make pro-LGBT content for kids, yet that's exactly what PBS's Postcards for Buster did. For anyone outside the US, PBS is an American television channel that airs a variety of educational and informative content, all available for free thanks to public funding and donations. It airs Sesame Street, Curious George, Arthur, and Postcards from Buster, the show about an animated rabbit named Buster who travels around the US with his weirdly human-looking father, meeting kids in different cities and learning about different ethnicities and cultures. In episode 33, Buster visits some children in the state of Vermont who just happen to have two mothers. Neither the show nor Buster make a big deal of it, they just introduce them as another happy Vermontian family. Cool, right? Sadly, before the episode made it to air, well, it looks like some lunatic heard about it. They contacted PBS and they demanded that the show either pull the episode or never ever receive public funds again if they were going to continue to promote the gay agenda. What? Oh, I'm sorry. Small correction. It wasn't a lunatic. It was the Education Secretary of the United States, Margaret Spellings, who literally, on her first day on the job, decided to threaten PBS with being defunded if they aired the episode. Because God forbid kids see this.
This is one of my favorite pictures.
How come?
Because it has my mom and Gillian, the people I love a lot, and they mean a lot to me.
I try not to be cynical on this channel, but come on. Come on. Really? PBS had no choice but to concede to Spelling's threat. I mean, they need those funds to stay on the air, but you still gotta respect them for trying to do what they did, especially since almost 4 years prior to that, PBS had gotten some flack for having a gay character in a show that didn't even have a gay character. Teletubbies was a hit BBC children's show that aired on PBS in America between 1997 and 2001. It followed the 4 Teletubbies in their weirdly psychedelic shire as they walked around and made noises and fell over and stuff. Look, I don't really understand the Teletubbies, but that's the basic gist. Unlike most weekday morning shows that targeted kids ages 3 to 5, Teletubbies was made to appeal to infants and very young toddlers, which meant less dialogue and more short bursts of colorful, engaging content. There was Poe, Lala, Dipsy, and of course, Tinky Winky. But in 1999, out of seemingly nowhere, famous televangelist Reverend Jerry Falwell, best known for blaming terrorist attacks on the acceptance of gay couples, charming, publicly announced to the world that in his God-given expert opinion, Tinky Winky was gay and needed to be taken off the air. Now, you might be wondering, what evidence did Falwell have that Tinky Winky was gay? Well, ladies and gentlemen of the off-screen jury, I'm Lawyer Paper Will, doing a terrible southern accent despite the fact that I was born in Georgia, here to present Jerry Falwell's irrefutable evidence that Tinky Winky was nothing but gay and kinky. Number 1, Tinky's purple. Gay people love purple, that's just a fact. Number 2, Tinky Winky's head symbol is an upside down purple triangle, which if you flip right side up and you change the color to be pink, that's a gay pride symbol right there. Number 3, Tinky Winky has a big red purse. Men don't have purses, and Tinky Winky is a man. Wait, is Tinky Winky a man? Whatever. You know what? If all that proof wasn't enough to convince you, then I think you need to see the video evidence. Hit the tape. I rest my case. Somehow, Falwell managed to gather a following with his claims about Tinky, which would force an executive producer from the Teletubbies to hold, I'm not kidding, an emergency press conference to address Tinky Winky's sexuality, in which he announces that, quote, the fact that Tinky Winky carries a magic bag doesn't make him gay. Now, you could argue that Falwell was just a jerk who let his bigotry color his perception of an innocent kids show, leading him to making a big spectacle. But can I get a little conspiratorial with you? Because between you and me, I don't think for a second Falwell ever believed that Tinky Winky was gay. No, I think Falwell was looking to create a distraction. I noticed that exactly 4 days before Falwell had his whole Tinky Winky gate. That's a gate with a G-A-Y, because I'm not funny. He just so happened to have delivered a speech about the Antichrist. And in this speech, he said that the Antichrist would be Jewish. So that's pretty bad. It's not a great speech. Falwell started getting slammed for being anti-Semitic, because he was being anti-Semitic, when all of a sudden he decided that right then and there was the time to wage a huge publicized PR campaign about how Tinky Winky was gay. Oh yeah, don't look at the stuff over here I said about Jewish people being the Antichrist. No, look over here. Don't look at this. Look at this. This is the real story. Isn't this thing I said crazy? Triangles, red purses, hide your kids. I'm not anti-Semitic. Falwell presented the most flashy, headline-snagging, WTFing, news cycle-dominating thing he could think of, and he waved it in front of the country's collective news faces to direct attention away from what he had said about Jewish people. And it worked! People forgot about the whole Jewish people will birth the Antichrist thing and focused on a very silly man and a very silly Teletubba theory. However, for all of Falwell's controversy, he's got nothing on our next figure. But before we talk about that, let's talk about today's sponsor, NordVPN. Fans of the channel know I've been really hesitant to accept sponsor offers for a while because I didn't want to endorse something that I don't, personally use or have tested, but NordVPN I've actually been using for years, so it's pretty cool to have them as a sponsor, especially since I rely on NordVPN for a lot of the stuff I make on this very channel. See, I could tell you about NordVPN's fast internet speeds, zero-click protection, anti-malware tools. I could tell you that hackers and scammers and phishers, they're getting more and more sophisticated in how they try to get to your digital information. Yeah, I could tell you about all that stuff. So, I did. I guess I just told you about that stuff. But I also mentioned that, I use NordVPN to make my videos. What did I mean? Well, as an American guy living in Japan, you would be amazed at how much stuff from the US and other countries is region locked. You can't access it from here. With NordVPN, I can choose my IP location and view stuff I use for this channel. Even if you're not living abroad, well, this is still a super useful feature. Down in the pinned comment, you'll find a link to some of my favorite and really weird Japanese bands whose content is region locked outside Japan. Go to NordVPN.com/paperwill, get a 2-year plan, 1 month free, 30-day money-back guarantee. Just use coupon code PAPERWILL and then listen to some of that region-locked music because it's so good. Now, let's get back to the show. Between the 1990s and the late 2010s, there was nobody bigger in the children's television market than Dan Schneider. Working for Nickelodeon, he created, wrote, or produced All of That, The Amanda Show, Kenan and Kel, Drake and Josh, iCarly, Zoe 101, Victorious, Sam and Cat, Henry Danger, Game Shakers, and more. Plenty of grown-ups found Snyder's shows to be a little cheesy, and fair enough, but there's no denying that his stuff resonated with kids. This unstoppable Snyder-Nick relationship continued happily until 2018 when, after decades of working together, it was suddenly announced that Snyder was leaving to focus on his family and maybe some personal projects. At least that's the official story. See, before Snyder left the network, Nickelodeon's parent company had in fact ordered an internal investigation about some of Snyder's less PG behavior, with accusations of verbal abuse, throwing tantrums on set, mean emails, and more. Some think that this investigation was the actual cause of Snyder's exit from Nickelodeon, and this whole thing was far less mutual than it had been presented as. Keep in mind, this was all happening the same year that Hollywood producer and human garbage pile, Harvey Weinstein, was ousted from power over sexual abuse and assault, so it's certainly possible Nick was hoping to avoid some sort of parallels being drawn through him to Snyder. Truthfully, we don't really know why he left, but we do know that even if Nick was done with Snyder, the internet wasn't. Beginning in the early to mid-2010s, several internet forums were slowly developing a theory that Mr. Snyder had a foot fetish, which by itself is not a big deal, but they think that he specifically had a fetish for the feet of children, which is a big deal, and that he'd used his position as a Nick producer to create content to satiate that fetish, which is a very big deal. And hold on, whoa. Let's be clear, that is a huge accusation to just throw around, so what's their evidence? No, we already did that bit. Let's just talk about the evidence. First up, according to them, Snyder shows have a lot of child foot humor, more than most content on TV for kids. And if you search for Snyder foot-related content, there's an endless number of compilations showing pretty weird things with feet and performers from his shows. And on the Twitter account for one of the shows, there was even a tweet asking kids to write the name of the show on their feet and send a picture of it for a retweet, although we don't know if Snyder was involved with that tweet or not. It may have just been, some intern on the PR team trying to do something funny. But we do know Snyder used his own account to ask people to name the toes on Jeanette McCurdy, who played Sam on iCarly. Another Reddit commenter in a now-deleted post claimed that Snyder once paid her $100 to let him try and tickle or massage her feet, which, if true, is a little weird. Alright, so what's Snyder's response? Well, in 2021, he denied the accusations, saying they were ridiculous, and he argued that he wouldn't have been able to pursue his career for so long if there had ever been any proof of something like this. And here's the thing, I know it is a super popular internet theory that Snyder is some sort of foot predator, and by taking a position where you doubt that theory, it makes you look like you're, enabling a predator. But the deeper I went into this topic, and the more research I did, the less convinced I became. As far as I can tell, most of this Snyder stuff formed on these celebrity gossip conspiracy forums, less, oh, who is that actor dating, and more like, these are the people controlling the world, those kinds of sites. And it eventually bled out into this internet's public consciousness, not as a theory anymore, but as a fact. Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of confirmed employee accounts of Snyder being a pretty crappy guy to work with, and that's really not the kind of person you want in charge of children who are trying to navigate the already messed up world of Hollywood. But, if we're talking about exploiting kids, how about some of the YouTube videos about this guy? There are people who put a picture of Snyder shows, performers and stuff, like in a thumbnail, next to a big quote like, "He touched me," and then you watch the video and the performer literally never said the quote. You want to make videos about kids getting exploited by Hollywood, go for it, that's great. But don't use children's faces all over your thumbnails with fake quotes to get clicks and views, because that, to me, that's exploitation. Again, Snyder leaving Nickelodeon, that's a good thing, but I'd argue that compared to Snyder, there was a much more pressing issue with someone else from Nickelodeon. Let me introduce you to Brian Peck. The name might not ring a bell, but if you like old zombie movies, well, you probably still won't know his name, although you might remember his brief scene from The Return of the Living Dead. After a short acting stint in the 1980s, Peck would go on to work on several Nick shows, including All That and The Amanda Show. Usually it was behind the scenes stuff, although he did appear in a couple of things, such as the guy who really likes his pickle.
Pickle Boy likes to hurt and tease pickles.
Ooh, that did not age well, huh? Peck was also involved with Snyder's Nickelodeon camps up until 2004, when he was charged with a series of crimes against a minor, most of which I can't say on YouTube, but you can probably guess at least what some of those were. After a 16-month stint in prison, which seems really short, Peck was released and went right back to working in children's television. Awesome. Great. Again, after his release from jail over sex crimes with people who aren't adults. Peck performed roles on The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, that Landon Tipton movie, and Jack and the Beanstalk in 2009. Credit to Nickelodeon, they never hired Peck back to work on the shows after his conviction, but it seems nobody on the mid-2000s Disney Channel recruitment team knew how to ask Jeeves a job applicant's criminal history. Hey Jeeves, is this guy a f***ing pedophile? Yeah? Oh great, thanks Jeeves, bye. Ooh, let's just move on. 4Kids. 4Kids Entertainment was an anime licensing company. A company that would pay to license anime from Japanese studios, redub the dialogue in English, and then sell the English versions to networks for broadcast. 4Kids' string of mega successes in the 1990s and early 2000s like Yu-Gi-Oh!, Kirby Right Back At Ya, One Piece, Sonic X, and Pokemon.
Platypyrus.
Oh, it's back! 4Kids was a big part in taking anime from a subculture in the West to a mainstream audience, but they also developed a negative reputation for the polarizing quality of their voice dubs.
Hey, Tim, stay down or we're busted.
Your attitude's the pits.
Cherry, peach, or apricot?
I want you to have a look at this Pokemon.
Huh? What is this thing?
And also what you might call over-enthusiastic censorship and obstructive cultural edits, like erasing pistols from bad guys but leaving their finger guns, or removing Japanese text but not adding any English on top of the text, turning cigarettes into lollipops, or their most famous example, getting characters to point to rice balls and call them jelly donuts over and over and over again.
Have a donut. That always cheers me up.
Pika pika!
These donuts are great. Jelly-filled are my favorite. Nothing beats a jelly-filled donut.
But none of that is why 4Kids is included in this video, because I kind of get what they were doing. Many of their edits were relatively minor cultural changes to help ease the transition of anime into that Western audience. 4Kids, like many licensing companies in the 90s, needed to make sure their content was accessible as possible to appeal to people who might not be familiar with anime. And some of their more bizarre changes make sense in the context of when they got aired. Like, take the Yu-Gi-Oh! Finger Guns example. Yes, it looks ridiculous, don't get me wrong, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Was only being aired a couple of years after the US Columbine incident, where guns were a hot-button issue in kids' entertainment. These things were tense in America in a way they just weren't in Japan, so it's understandable why 4Kids wanted to make some changes, and honestly, most kids probably didn't think about it very much. At least I didn't. I'd even argue that in 4Kids' earlier stuff, there was a lot of passion in what they did, especially from the voice performers and translators. No, 4Kids isn't in this video because of their off-putting localization choices. They're in the video because they broke the law. It turns out 4Kids wasn't doing so great in the late 2000s, most likely due to their quantity over quality approach to anime releases, as well as losing some big names like Pokemon. Is he here? Is he here? He's going? Alright. Like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! 4Kids started making deals with American broadcasting companies over licenses 4Kids technically didn't own, or pay for, or have the right to do that with. And even with the license they did own, there were cases of them misreporting royalty deductions, submitting false tax withholdings, and sometimes just straight up lying about their revenue, which is a, crime. Once Japanese companies found out, and of course they found out, 4Kids lost some of their biggest names, mainly the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, and in 2011, they filed for bankruptcy. And sure, legal issues with anime licensing have always been messy. Funimation's anti-piracy policies have been borderline psychotic. Odex has sent legal threats to children for torrenting content. ADVision, Gainax, SRE, Crunchyroll has been sued over f***ing stickers. Nearly every major company in the licensing world has sued or been sued over something. It's a ridiculous legal minefield. But for me, the 4Kids story is the saddest example because their content was such a big part of my childhood. Despite the hit or miss voice work and the weird cleavage stuff and that, whatever's going on there, 4Kids helped turn anime mainstream. It's sad to see that group go down in flames over something they could have avoided by just staying focused and delivering good work and keeping up with the standards of Western anime fans. Of course, not all the problems with anime are due to licensing. There's tons of stuff going on behind the scenes in animation in Japan that we need to talk about. I know, not all anime is made for kids, but children were the main demographic when anime was first televised in Japan, and it all really started with one man, manga artist and animator Osamu Tezuka, and his 1964 show, Astro Boy. Set in the distant future of 2004, the series was about a young android named Astro Boy who protected the city and the world from out-of-control robots. It's a great show that sometimes gets a negative reputation due to some of the unfortunate English dubs.
It's not is my name.
And this show was the foundation on which the modern anime industry was built, for better or for worse. See, it hadn't been easy for Tezuka to get Astro Boy on the air. At the time, broadcasting executives in Japan were concerned that the cost of a weekly animated show would just be too high. Yeah, a couple of series like Tetsujin 28 and Wolf Boy Ken had aired to moderate success, but networks were still unconvinced. Tezuka, though, he was sure that if he could just get Astro Boy on the air, it would blast off and prove that serialized animated shows were a viable market, not just a fad. So, Tezuka and his animation team made a very risky offer to the broadcasters. Tezuka's company would make Astro Boy on severely reduced pay with the condition that they'd keep a larger percentage of any merchandising profit. Essentially, if Astro Boy was a hit, Tezuka's team would make a killing on merchandise, but if it failed, well, they'd probably be out of business. The networks loved this deal because it was basically costing them nothing, so they went ahead with it. Luckily for Tezuka and his team, the contract gamble paid off, and Astro Boy was a nationwide success with merch sales that easily offset any initial losses. In Tezuka's mind, this was the perfect outcome, not just because his team had made some money, not just because they'd made a high-quality program, but because now TV broadcasters would pay a fair income to all future anime studios. After all, they'd seen how successful it could be, so surely they're going to pay fairly now. Right? Predictably, the networks thought about it and decided, they really preferred not paying more money, and instead they used Astro Boy's contract as a precedent for how all anime would be funded from then on. A precedent that still stands today. Modern animation studios are still getting paid pennies on the dollar or smaller yens on the bigger yens. They're not getting paid enough, with the majority of revenue going to networks and production committees who often hold the IP licenses. Shingo Adachi, a head animator for the popular series Sword Art Online, says that there's simply no dream animation job where you make a good salary and have good working conditions. It just doesn't exist. Animation veteran Jun Arai has also added that with the Pokemon series, flat up. Whatever. You're actually kind of cute in a whole, God's little mistake kind of way. Who's a little abomination? Who's a little abomination? It's you. Yes, it's you. But yeah, Jun Arai has said that the Pokemon anime, which makes $100 million a year, just on the anime, not including any of the other stuff, that show pays its animators less per dollar than what you'd make working at the next door 7-Eleven. That's rough. And it's not just salaries. Working hours are long and brutal in the animation studios. There are countless reports of workers in the industry being hospitalized due to overwork at rates even higher than the national average in Japan, the country famous for overworking. Yoshifumi Kondo, a senior animation director in Ghibli Studios, died of an overwork-related aneurysm in 1998, which caused Miyazaki so much grief that he ended up retiring for several years. And because the only people who are willing to put up with all of this do so because they're passionate about their craft, well, that means not many people are pushing for change. This is the unseen problem behind most anime you liked as a kid, and probably most shows you like now. Unless it's from one of the very, very few paying studios with good working conditions like Kyoto Animation, your favorite stuff is probably being made by a studio full of underpaid artists, and it's a deadly situation, and it's not improving. Staying on the topic of animation, but moving back stateside, this right here is John Kricfalusi, creator of the 90s animated series The Ren and Stimpy Show. Alongside Doug and Rugrats, The Ren and Stimpy Show was one of Nickelodeon's earliest Nicktoons series, and it helped put the channel on the map for original programming. But unlike Doug and Rugrats and most shows for kids, Kricfalusi wanted Ren and Stimpy to be hyper-violent, risque, constantly pushing boundaries, and frankly, kids loved it for that. Nickelodeon, however, didn't. While the show was a major hit for Nick, Kricfalusi and his team would constantly miss deadlines and go tens of thousands of dollars over budget, putting Nick into a tricky position. On the one hand, they were thrilled to have a success in their hands on their very small network, but on the other, Nick wasn't able to capitalize on that success due to those delays. And when I say delays, I'm not talking like a week or a month. One episode, Stimpy's Invention, took over a year to produce. Still, by most accounts I could find, Nick wasn't happy over the delays, but they'd probably have accepted them had the show been more on brand. In 1991, Nickelodeon was still early in its original programming period, and they wanted to paint themselves as clean and parent-friendly. Neither term you could use to describe Ren and Stimpy with. But Kricfalusi, to put it lightly, didn't respond well to Nick's pressure. According to some of his and Nick's staff, Kricfalusi had let some of the success go to his head, believing that as the creator and the voice actor for Ren, there was no way Nick would ever get rid of him, no matter what he did. So, when Nickelodeon pushed down on him to deliver episodes on time, he responded with, episodes will cost what they cost and take as long as they take, and he was going to keep putting in risque humor that he wanted because Nick could do it themselves if they disagree. So they did. Nick terminated his contract, gave him the boot, and continued making the show on their own. And while it's sad to see a talented artist losing control over their work, the more I read about the situation, the more and more sympathetic I become to Nickelodeon. Kricfalusi was undeniably a brilliant creator, but he was also kind of a jerk sometimes. Various workers from the show have said that working with Kricfalusi was a nightmare. The man had tempers, he would rip up drawings, he screamed, he demanded perfection, and he refused to hire anybody who didn't meet his impossibly high standards. Ouch! So, the studio was always understaffed, and that caused more delays. And after being fired, Kricfalusi has been accused of creating a smear campaign against any of the artists that chose to continue with Ren and Stimpy instead of resigning in support with him. David Konigsberg, a technical director on the show, says Kricfalusi literally shoved him down a flight of stairs about this. But it would also be unfair of me to imply that Kricfalusi's team universally hated him. They didn't. In fact, there were many on his staff who were fiercely loyal to the guy because although he was challenging to work with, John Kay got results. That episode I mentioned earlier that took a whole year to produce, that episode is considered a modern classic of animation. It's genius.
It's the happy, happy, joy, joy song.
Plus, who the hell am I to criticize somebody for being bad at deadlines? This video was supposed to be out like 3 months ago. And in between animation seasons, Kricfalusi has been known to pay some of his artists out of pocket to make sure they had enough money when not working. But all the things we've talked about so far, that's just the bad stuff. We're here to talk about the ugly stuff. Let's rewind a little bit back before Kricfalusi got fired. Ren and Stimpy is a gigantic success, and it's coming on its second season, and kids all over the world are falling in love with the show, including the 13-year-old aspiring artist, Robin Bird. Uh-oh. Bird loved the show so much, she even sent a fan letter to Kricfalusi talking about her dreams of working in animation and how his show had inspired her. And to her delight, she got a letter back from him. She got several letters back from him. Then she started getting care packages from him with things like art supplies and animation tools. Uh-oh. And after Bird turned 16, Kricfalusi flew her out to work as an intern at his animation studio, and also to secretly live with him as they dated. Uh-oh! Yep, John Kay had hired his underage teenage girlfriend as an intern to work on the content he was releasing. After Bird ended the relationship once she became an adult, Kricfalusi had already begun corresponding with another girl, the 14-year-old Katie Rice. John Kay even attended her 15th birthday.
Hey, this is Katie Rice. She is one of the young artists I was telling you about. Katie showed me one time. She drew, I was at her 15th birthday party. We'll tell you that backstory a little bit later.
Allegedly, much of this was an open secret on John's animation team, but it only became truly public in the 2010s when a BuzzFeed article detailing the issue was released with quotes from Bird and Rice. Kricfalusi didn't deny much of the article's allegations, making a public apology post on Facebook to Bird and Rice soon after. Although he did strongly imply that some of the article was embellished for sensationalism, and hey, it's a BuzzFeed article, so I'd suggest taking anything that's not a quote from the victims themselves with a grain of salt, but those quotes, as well as Kricfalusi's own admissions, are mountains more than enough evidence to show that he was a predator to young fans. No shocker here, but sometimes bad things happen. Maybe there's a major natural disaster, an act of terrorism, a worldwide pandemic, and in the immediate days, weeks, and months after those events, it's kind of seen as insensitive by TV networks to make or air content too reminiscent of it. So a lot of things get temporarily pulled from television. Obviously, this kind of tragedy-redolent content doesn't only affect kids' TV, it happens to everything. Like this trailer for the original Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire, which was replaced due to a very unnice thing happening in New York soon after. There's also really, really poorly timed advertisements like this 1989 Kentucky Fried Chicken ad talking about how everybody's so excited to come out and support the new KFC in Tiananmen Square.
But now there's a recipe that has even the Chinese crossing the road.
Which aired as this happened. Comics, video games, newspaper strips, even trading card games have to be careful about this stuff. In early 2020, Magic the Gathering had these limited-time special prints of Godzilla-related cards, and one of the cards was Space Godzilla. Looks cool as hell, but unfortunately his full name was Space Godzilla Death Corona. God, that's bad timing. It's not Magic the Gathering's fault, and they fixed it quickly, of course, but you can still find it online for $11 on Amazon. But tragedy-redolent content is especially tricky to navigate in kids' entertainment. The earliest example in history, at least the earliest one that I could find, was in 1940's A Wild Hare, Bugs Bunny's debut cartoon. Bugs comes up behind Elmer and plays Guess Who, with Elmer guessing Barbara Stanwyck.
Barbara Stanwyck.
Unless you saw the cartoon before 1942, when the original guess was Carole Lombard.
Carole Lombard?
Unfortunately, Lombard passed away in a plane crash around the cartoon's debut, and the line was changed. And there are tons of examples throughout media. Several episodes of Freakazoid with visual cameos by Princess Diana got pulled after her fatal accident. The 1997 episode of Rugrats called Vacation had two Vegas magicians, Siegfried and Roy, being attacked by a tiger as a joke, but it got pulled after that actually happened in 2003. There was a G.I. Joe rerun pulled in 2011 since the episode showed Cobra trying to destroy a Japanese city with earthquakes, which then immediately happened in March 2011. An episode of Lion Guard titled Never Roar Again, which prominently featured crocodiles trying to eat the kid characters. That got pulled after the 2016 alligator attack near Disney World. Chip and Dale, Tailspin, 101 Dalmatians, friggin' Sonic the Hedgehog, they have all run into this problem. Buzz Lightyear of Star Command had not one, but 2 episodes pulled. Those episodes, by the way, were Inside Job and Conspiracy, and got pulled due to their name or the storyline where Buzz is accused of trying to kill the president. The longer you spend in that weird rabbit hole, the more and more you start seeing a certain idea, a certain conspiracy theory. Predictive programming in kids' television. Believers in this theory think there's a secret group of powerful people who control the world, and that this group plans and orchestrates all tragedies, all disasters, and all terrorist attacks. But to make sure that people accept those happenings as normal, that group also plants little clues and hints all over fiction and media.
A Beverly Hills Cynthia lunchbox, a pony, and a 9/11 emergency surgical kit with working stethoscope.
And look, even as a big skeptic, I love learning about things like the paranormal, about UFOs, and yeah, about conspiracy theories and even cults. I have a whole video about movies and music made by actual cults. So as someone who can appreciate a fun conspiracy theory, trust me when I say the examples I've seen of predictive programming in kids' television are weak. Like, sticking with that unnice 2001 New York thing, let's go through some of the most popular examples of quote, proof that some secret society organized it decades in advance and put hints all over media about it. Let's see, a 1978 episode of Super Friends with the Legion of Doom making a tower bend a little, a 1985 episode of G.I. Joe where a plane hits 2 towers. Oh, it doesn't even hit them. It parks. An episode of Spider-Man Unlimited where 2 pillars get knocked down. An episode of Gargoyles where there's a blast on the top of the World Trade Center in a show based in New York. Wow, what a surprise. They used the tallest building. There's a scene in DuckTales where a plane knocks over some statues, and one of my favorites, a background movie poster in Johnny Bravo with a building on fire. Look at it. Look at the proof. Secret cartoon secret agents must have snuck in one night and drawn that burning building on a poster just so kids would remember that in 7 or 8 years and then be like, oh, I saw that in Johnny Bravo, so that's normal. It's just absurd. Like, there's a 1994 episode of Iron Man that had a terrorist plan to fly some hijacked planes into the Pentagon and the World Trade. Oh. But the truth is, nobody is brainwashing kids with predictive programming. They do it with advertisements. Between 1946 and 1980, kid-targeting advertisements in the US were somewhat limited by broadcasting rules. But in 1981, the FCC began dismantling regulations on ads for kids, which paved the way for what is now sometimes referred to as the era of 30-minute commercials. Companies could make a toy, then make a TV show about the toy, then air commercials for the toy during the TV show about the toy. And they could line up 2, 3, 4 hours of programming like this back to back to back. In the first half of the 1980s, cartoons featuring merchandise characters increased over 300%. And I'm not just talking about action figures, although I'm definitely also talking about action figures. Snacks, posters, stickers, clothes, lunchboxes, McDonald's toys, everything. Even talking teddy bears like Teddy Ruxpin and his creepy-ass live action show, around which you could even advertise the toy. Eventually, the Children's Television Act was set up to limit commercials to kids during prime time, so luckily, that's not a problem anymore. But the reason I'm talking about toys, well, I'm not suggesting that all merch-driven shows were inherently bad. They weren't. Lots of them were engaging, memorable, and well-written. Like I said earlier, I loved Power Rangers, and that was basically one big toy commercial. The problem is that a show's success, even today, often relies on how much tie-in merchandise it can push. Good shows, great shows, got cut because they couldn't push toys. And maybe we should expect better from the kind of entertainment— oh, son of a I'm on the soapbox again. Child stars. Yeah, you probably knew this topic was coming eventually. Let's go back before Disney Channel stars and 90s sitcoms, before television, to the 1920s, 1921 specifically, and it's the big premiere of Charlie Chaplin's classic film, The Kid. But it's also the diving board for a new star's career, the 6-year-old Jackie Coogan. After starring in the film, Coogan would go on to a prolific child career, making around $50 million before his 18th birthday. But upon reaching adulthood, Coogan, to his horror, found that most of his money was just gone. His mother and stepfather, a man who was also his financial advisor, had blown through all of it on booze, luxury items, and cars. In the 1930s, you had Shirley Temple, who referred to some of her earliest time in the industry as, quote, a cynical exploitation of our childish innocence. On one set, if she acted up, she was put into a windowless, soundproof box affectionately titled the punishment box, like an actual physical punishment box. Throughout her teen career, Temple was groped, harassed, sometimes straight up attacked by various scumbags. Once by a producer who, during a meeting with her, engaged his remote control door lock, a thing no Hollywood producer should be allowed to have, by the way, and literally chased her around the room. It's so over the top and evil that it's almost funny, but it's not funny because it actually happened. Oh, and just like Jackie Coogan, Temple would have most of her money squandered by her parents before her 18th birthday. And don't even get me started on Judy Garland in the 1940s. Almost everybody's aware how she was mistreated while working on The Wizard of Oz. Her parents, the studio, the director, everybody treated her like crap. And because some people on the production were worried that the 16-year-old Garland didn't look young or thin enough, this girl, they pumped her full of amphetamines and cigarettes to keep her looking thinner. Garland never quite managed to shake her childhood treatment or the substance abuse, going broke and passing away from an overdose in her late 40s. In the 1950s, there was Bobby Driscoll, whose young performances so impressed Walt Disney himself that Driscoll was put under the company's very first acting contract. Even if you've never heard of Driscoll, you've probably heard his voice as the titular character in Peter Pan. But once Driscoll hit puberty, typecasting led to work in the industry just drying up. In fact, he only learned that his Disney contract had ended when he drove up to the studio gate and was refused entrance. Unable to find steady work again, he fell into substance abuse, lost all of his money, and passed away at the age of 31 from an overdose. By the 1970s, the entertainment industry had noticed that a lot of their child stars were ending up not alive, so they enacted a series of regulations on childhood working conditions. Think reduced working hours, financial protections, mandatory supervision, all great things. But even with these positive changes in the industry, there are still plenty of awful conditions and practices that child performers are subjected to. Plenty of kids still grow up to find that a lot of their money is just gone. The most famous example probably being Gary Coleman. That poor guy, people were stealing money from that dude his whole life, from childhood to old age. Did you know that this is true? They had to postpone his funeral because people were too busy fighting over the estate he left behind. And it wasn't even that much money. And it's not just finances. Some child stars have been subjected to outright physical abuse on set by parents, with studios looking the other way to avoid trouble with CPS. Plus, having a professional relationship with your own children can complicate your actual relationship. In a 1998 paper published in the Journal of Personality Assessment, children performers were shown to feel far less connected to their parents who manage their careers than those of normal kids. That disconnect, that inability to open up to their own parents, among other factors, is making it so much easier for kids to become the targets of countless child predators in the industry. And sometimes predators come in ways you wouldn't expect. For example, in the 2014 documentary An Open Secret, parents of child performers talk about how they often find their kids' headshots and model pictures they'd only sent to casting directors, being sold on online auctions, sometimes for hundreds of dollars. Kids that aren't even famous. And even if a kid manages to get famous, have some good roles, have parents that are supportive but not overbearing, avoids predators, and eventually decides that they want to leave the industry, well, even that's tricky. In a 2013 article written by Mara Wilson, who you may recognize from Matilda, Mrs. Doubtfire, and more recently, the faceless woman who secretly lives in your house from Welcome to Night Vale, Wilson points out that many child stars literally grow up surrounded by the industry, with everyone they know being connected to it. Plus, they're often discouraged from prioritizing their own educations over acting gigs, so how do you escape that? Well, a lot of them can't. Instead, they stick around believing that they're trapped and turn to substance abuse and alcoholism and poor life choices and sometimes choosing to end their lives. I'm not going to name off every former child actor that's done this, by the way, because I think that would be in really poor taste, but it also feels in poor taste not to talk about it. And there's a lot of them that have done this. And if we're being honest with ourselves, we're all just kind of numb to it, aren't we? At this point, most of us are more surprised when a former child performer comes out of the industry normal than we are when one takes their own life. How messed up is the industry? How messed up are we that this is our status quo? You know, after everything we've looked at today, not just the child star stuff, but everything, it would be understandable if you came away feeling a little depressed about kids television. At least that's how I was feeling when I was making this. For months, all I did was spend my time diving into all the horrible dark rabbit holes, the stories of abusers and victims and cover-ups and bullying and controversies and lawsuits and a lot of stuff that didn't even make it into this video because it was just too damn dark or depressing. While working on this video's research and script, I started wondering, why was I even making this? Am I creating something just to depress people? Just to make them feel bad about the shows they loved as kids? What's the value of content like this? It got so bad that I even started thinking about trashing the whole project and doing something less miserable. Until one night, when I ran across a video. This is a video recording of a 1969 Senate hearing. A hearing that was put together with one single goal, to decide whether or not the US government should dramatically cut its $20 million public funding for PBS. You remember PBS, right? We've mentioned them a few times in this video, but they air free public educational programming for kids. And like I mentioned earlier, they desperately rely on public funds to make that happen. And if the Senate hearing went badly, those funds were about to get slashed. Leading the hearing was Senator John O. Pastor, a notoriously tough man with an equally notorious reputation for eliminating any government spending he thought was wasteful. And during the Senate hearing, it was becoming very clear he wanted PBS on the chopping block. Over several days, Pastor had listened to the testimony from various officials, executives, childhood educational advocates, and other people begging, pleading with him to keep PBS funded. You have to understand, PBS was the only free educational programming available to a lot of kids at the time, especially for kids in low-income families where something like Sesame Street might be the only educational content they had until entering first grade. But Senator Pastor wasn't having any of it. In preparation for the hearing, he actually hadn't watched very much of PBS's lineup, and with each passing speaker, he only seemed to get more and more aggressive with his questions. He would interrupt speeches, criticize, and challenge every opposing viewpoint. After all, in his mind, children's TV was all cartoons and violence and mindlessness. You know, children weren't learning from that garbage, so why should the government be paying for it? Things looked pretty bleak for PBS. Until the final day of the hearing when somebody from PBS, in perhaps the most hopeless Hail Mary in television history, asked one of their newest show hosts to speak up, to do something, anything to help convince Senator Pastor not to cut their budget. And the man they asked to talk...
It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine?
Was a young Fred Rogers. For those of you who don't know him, Fred Rogers was the host of the children's television show Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Airing alongside Sesame Street and other PBS content, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood focused on teaching very young kids, 2, 3, 4-year-olds, about simple stuff in life, like what firemen do, what a hula hoop is, that sort of thing. But even with how young his audience was, Mr. Rogers believed kids would have questions about more complicated topics, so sometimes he would discuss things like divorce, or racial relations, or disabilities, or even sometimes accepting death. But he managed to talk about those things in a way that helped kids feel informed but safe, which is incredible. Rogers hosted his show for nearly 40 years, and by many Americans, this man is practically deified as a beacon of kindness, humility, and respect. But in 1969, Mr. Rogers was not the established, beloved figure he would later become. Most people, including the gruff Senator Pasteur, had never even heard of Rogers' new show, yet here he was with the weight of educational programming in the US all on his shoulders. And he accepts the mic. Rogers takes out his prepared statement letter, but decides instead not to read it out loud. Dozens of people had read their statements to Pasteur already to no avail, so instead, Mr. Rogers just talks to him. He talks to him about trust, about how important it is to impart to children, to give to children, and how it's something that he wants to teach kids about on his show. Mr. Rogers says that he trusts Senator Pasteur will read that statement later on in his own time. Pasteur, still irritated from the last few days of the hearing, quickly snaps at Roger with,
"Will it make you happy if you read it?"
But Mr. Rogers quietly and politely says, no, he just wants to have a conversation. So that's exactly what they did. Rogers tells Pasteur about the simple life lessons they try to teach on his show, things like haircuts and family and everything. Throughout this talk, Pasteur seems a little taken aback. He doesn't interrupt Rogers like he had with previous speakers. He doesn't challenge Rogers on how every dollar is being spent every single moment. He just listens. Rogers talks about how this show tries to impart to children how they have value, purely on the virtue of being themselves. Roger talks about the drive he has of giving children that gift in life, that gift of being told that you're wanted, a gift that they might not be receiving from anybody else in their lives.
Mm-hmm. I'm proud of you, you know that. I hope you do.
And then, do you know what he does? Mr. Rogers, this little nobody in the big Senate hearing, this Pennsylvania bumpkid David out of local access television in front of the Goliath senator, in front of the hearing, in front of the country, he reads the lyrics of a song he wrote for kids.
Could I tell you the words of one of the songs which I feel is very important?
Yes.
What do you do with the mad that you feel when you feel so mad you could bite? When the whole wide world seems oh so wrong, and nothing you do seems very right. What do you do? Do you punch a bag? Do you pound some clay or some dough? Do you round up friends for a game of tag or see how fast you go? It's great to be able to stop when you've planned a thing that's wrong and be able to do something else instead. And think this song. I can stop when I want to, can stop when I wish, can stop, anytime. And what a good feeling to feel like this, and know that the feeling is really mine. Know that there's something deep inside that helps us become what we can.
As Rogers finishes, there's a very brief moment of quiet. Then Senator John O. Pasteur, the hard-hitting Washington bureaucrat, looks at Mr. Rogers, and he smiles, and he says,
"Looks like you just earned the $20 million.
You could argue that what Rogers talked about and sang about on that day, the words themselves, they didn't matter. Those weren't what convinced Pasteur. No, it was seeing an individual with a genuine passion for the real inner needs of kids. Pasteur knew that the money for PBS, well, it was never going to make financial returns, but it could be going to someone sincerely devoted to helping young children learn and to teach them that they have value every single day. And $20 million is a small price to pay for that.
There's only one in this wonderful world. You are special.
The story of that hearing, well, it reminded me, yeah, there's an ugly side of kids' television. There's controversies, dangerous ads, horrible industry practices, but the majority of people who work in kids' TV are the ones we didn't talk about today. The fiercely dedicated creators, writers, animators, crew, performers, directors, and more that do their best to create something special that speaks to kids, to create media to help kids understand how to process their feelings, to learn about something new, to be told they have value, to see that they aren't alone in their growing experiences, to be told it's okay to be who you are, whoever you are, to joke about the impenetrable world of grown-ups and all their silliness, to enjoy the weird and the quirky, and maybe even for a young kid who always felt like he didn't fit in, to come home every day after school and have something that made him feel less lonely. As for David Yost, well, you'll be happy to know he's in a much better place now. He was, in time, able to embrace his own sexuality and would return to the industry as both an actor and as a producer. And not only that, but he's gone on to use his Power Ranger status to raise money for the Children's Hospital AIDS Center and to promote the No Hate campaign, which advocates for LGBT plus acceptance and equality. He was able to turn a terrible part of his life into a platform to help others who were going through what he himself went through. And maybe most exciting for me, while I was making this video, it was announced that Yost is coming back to Power Rangers. That's right. Yost, as Billy, is coming back for the 30th anniversary season, premiering next year, I think. And I cannot tell you how hyped I am about this. And I know, not everything in kids' TV is pretty, but after all the crap David Yost dealt with all those years ago, then using that suffering as a way to help people who suffered like he did, and then to make a return to the show in this new, healthier place, well, there's nothing ugly about that. Good night, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Platypirus.
Hi there, do you enjoy Paper Wheel content but don't want to wait 8 friggin' months between videos? Oh my god, it really has been 8 months. It's almost been 9. Check out my second channel, Paper Wheel's Garbage Can, where bloopers, outtakes, cut content, and other stuff not really good enough for this channel goes. It's called a garbage can for a reason. But first, let's do some credits, starting with the Kickstarter supporters who donated specifically for this video last year when I was completely unknown YouTuber, unlike now where I'm just mostly unknown YouTuber. Cruzy, Brian D, Bun Bun, Phil Rock War, Bethany, The Prince of Salt, Pisces Go, Way Deep Entertainment, Sergey K, Chris Estrada, Brett G, Ian G, Joel A, Iam, Jacob, another big supporter, Levi B, and Visual RK. And thanks as well to Paul R for his second donation. Next up, Patreon supporters. Thank you. All of you, thank you so much. My videos take a very long time to make, and not all of them are eligible for monetization. Probably not this one, to be honest. So it means the world to me to have people supporting me, like you do. And if you'd like to join my Patreon, there's a link down in the description where you can find some extra behind-the-scenes stuff and production updates. You actually don't need to be a Patreon supporter to see all that stuff. It's all set to public, so check it out. And if you like me, give me money. If you don't like me, you can donate to someone who will beat me up, I guess. If you want to, but it's probably easier not to. I should really stop this and retake it, but I'm not going to because it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and you know what? This is live television. Let's just treat it as live television and we'll go from there. Is anybody still listening? Okay, as well as the shout-outs from Brad Taste in Music and Windigoon. Oh my god, I'm a big fan of both of their stuff, so it was so cool to have them even know who I was and, even recommend my stuff to me. Windigoon, thank you again. That's amazing. I think you literally took my channel from 2K subscribers to, I think it's like 65K now. Oh my god. This video's animated opening was made by Gad Studio, music by Adam Blotner. The Platypirus monster / best Pokemon ever was made by Jay Hoenjulf, I think, and named by Ben Pusey. We actually talked about how to pronounce his name correctly, and I said it wrong. I made a memo right here. Pusey. Ben Pusey. Thank you. Audio engineering by Austin Steele and background art by Polyplanet. Additional research by AceDog11, and also thanks to Ginkasa from the Reddit of the Power Rangers Reddit, who helped me track down a really important clip from Power Rangers. It really brought the whole video together, I think, and you can try to guess what it was. Anyway, I'm sorry for this credits. See you all next video. It should be out sometime in the next 20 years. Bye.